Hey, happy weekend, everybody. It's Friday. Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here. If you've been watching WCNC today, the U.S. Open is on right now. We've been streaming here on WCNC Plus news since 4 o'clock. We're back to weather here, and we had a rough night last night, especially in parts of South Charlotte. We're going to dive into that a little bit later in the show as we talk about some of the flooding, some of the epic rainfall totals that we saw. Creek levels were all-time records, and then we're going to talk about 500,000-year rainfall events versus flood events. Some pretty geeky stuff, but I want to focus on the weather right now because everyone's concerned, are we going to see more of these pop-up storms? And we certainly are today as we take a live look at our Dallas camera. Jeb's going to punch that up for us, and pretty cool shot. I mean, this we were watching this, Lily, our intern here, we were kind of watching this storm, and you can actually see the rain still falling. It looks like off the lens there. So if you're not familiar, our Dallas camera is over in Gaston County. It's along 321 in northern Gaston County. And the camera is up there at 1,450 feet. Our tower is actually about 2,000 feet tall, but the camera is a little bit further down. So it kind of gives you the perspective that you're in a helicopter or a drone. So we're pretty far up there, and you can see the bottom of the clouds there. So let me show you where that storm is on the radar. We'll kind of focus on the local radar. Much quieter last night. Remember, we were tracking that big wave of showers and storms moving in. So the storm that we just saw pass our camera, I'm going to zoom in on it. There's Dallas, North Carolina, right there. So the shower is kind of moving from Dallas to Spencer Mountain over to the Stanley area. And this is the town of Stanley, not the county of Stanley, which is spelled slightly different because we're going to talk about Stanley County in a minute. But you can see the showers moving off to the north and east there. And again, these are heading towards Lowesville, the southern part of Lake Norman. These are traveling northeast pretty quickly. We move into Mecklenburg County, and you can see a little showers popped up in Cabarrus County near Concord. The one thing you notice, these are actually moving. Unlike last night, we had a cluster of storms kind of develop over uptown, and they just kind of sat over areas between, I'd say, the Lake Wiley to like the Plaza area. They just sat there the entire time. Now, we do have some current flood warnings, which is kind of weird because when you look at this, you're probably going to say there's not much rain there. This is because of previous rain, and I'll highlight a couple of flood warnings here. Does include parts of Anson, Montgomery, Richmond, and Stanley County. So this is the county version, not the town of Stanley, which is over in Gaston County. Flash flood warning as well for Hoke, Montgomery, Moore, and Richmond counties. And this area, Southern Pines, I got some video in a second ago from a golfing buddy of mine. I actually had to pull it up here in a second because it's pretty wild. I'll probably take this full screen in a second, see if I can bring it up full screen. Oh, come on, get bigger. I was going to try to punch this up full screen. Let's see if I can get it bigger. But this was a pretty significant
Where the hell
rainfall.
back there? Oh, okay. Oh, I see what you mean by that.
But you're going to watch it, you kind of go there. You can see all of that water. That's the cart path that he's driving. Here's another video from the southern area. So you get the idea. You can see there. So if you've never been over that area, you can see this it's called the sand hills because it's very scenic. Tremendous. So if you go back to the radar, we could see those two warnings, which have been extended. They were briefly up till 5:30, 6 o'clock, but they've been extended to 7:45 and 8 o'clock because of all that runoff over there. Now, I'm going to widen this back out because unlike last night, we were tracking a whole bunch of clusters of storms that were heading in from the southeast, and they kind of collided over us. But if we see these showers, they're kind of moving out. And then over Charlotte, the area of greatest concern, if we see any rain at all, and I'm talking about even light showers, this is the area we're going to be watching for. This area got absolutely clobbered last night. And I'll show you the totals coming up here in a minute. But some of the totals in that area, again, were 3 to 5 inches of rain. Also, I want to point out Stanley County had a bunch of heavy rain last night as well. So any rain that moves back into Stanley County could cause some additional flooding. So let's widen the view because we're kind of seeing to the southwest today. The movement of the storms, southwest to northeast, that movement is giving us a different direction, but it's actually moving the storms as well. Last night we had completely stationary stuff and so it was not moving at all, and that's kind of allowed for some flash flooding risk. So let me look at the short range future cast, because this will kind of give you an idea. There's some hints, and I'm seeing this in a couple different pieces of data, that even though it's super quiet right now, we'll have to watch this around 9, 10 o'clock. You see that little cluster of storms, and look where it forms. Not in the spot we want it to form. So again, all modeling is wrong, but some modeling is useful. That's a motto I will live by. There will probably be some storms somewhere. Will they be in this exact spot? Probably not, and let's hope not, because if it's anywhere near that vicinity, it would not take anything to cause flash flooding in those same spots. It could quickly cause the creeks and streams to rise pretty quickly, because, as I'll show you in a minute, a lot of the creeks are still running high. Not as high as yesterday, but higher than kind of where they were before the rainfall yesterday. And then that little cluster kind of moves off to the south and east and becomes a pretty good line through Union County, Anson, Stanley County, then moves off into Richmond County, which, again, if that moves back towards Southern Pines, where they're getting clobbered right now, then you would be dealing with another round of maybe some flash flooding over in the Sandhills. So that's kind of what I'm watching for this evening. And to break it down hour by hour, we can kind of show you. This is for Charlotte specifically, so it's not for the whole area. So I want to be completely transparent there. This is primarily for the Charlotte metro. There's an indication between 9 and 11 we could see an uptick in rainfall. So we'll be watching that carefully this evening. I think it'll be kind of, I don't think the probability is as high as that. There is some uncertainty involved in that. So I don't want you to think that it's a sure thing, but that's the time frame if we're going to see flooding. So if you have late dinner plans or you're heading out this evening, that would be something we got to keep an eye on. Now, the pattern, which is interesting. Yesterday I showed this graphic. We had a southeast wind. That blew the sea breeze all the way from the coast. Tonight, the flow is more south-southwest around that subtropical ridge. So what's happening is we're starting to see kind of more of a movement, and the flow is coming from southwest to northeast. So that's allowing for these showers and storms to move out. But here's something that has changed a lot from yesterday to today. It was pretty muggy yesterday. These dew points, that's gross. I mean, that is just low to mid 70s for dew points. That's about as high as our dew points get around here. But this really illustrates how saturated the atmosphere is, meaning it's taking very little to produce very heavy rainfall. When you have dew points in the 70s, that's at the surface, but even aloft, I mean, all the way up to the top of the troposphere, we've got a pretty saturated column. We call that precipitable water. It's a term we use in meteorology. It means basically how much water is in a column of the atmosphere. If you squeezed it all out, how much would you get? And today it's like around 2 inches. And so that's pretty high. On a normal summer day, it might be an inch, inch and a half. On a dry day, it's less than an inch. To have 2-inch precipitable water values, that's pretty high. And this is an illustration of what that looks like. We call this atmospheric moisture, but what this actually is precipitable water. You see the areas kind of in that salmon orangish color? That's tropical. That's the 2-inch plus precipitable water amounts, and you can see how much of it's over the Carolinas. Now notice it's mainly east of the Piedmont, but it kind of surges back tomorrow. So just a heads up, big weekend, Father's Day weekend. There'll be a lot of U.S. Open on WCNC, so a lot of folks will be watching golf. Just have an idea that if there are any storms in your area, the ones that get going are potentially going to produce some flash flooding, and that moisture kind of sticks around from Sunday into Monday, and then eventually tries to break down. So we're kind of stuck in a rut, to be honest with you. The pattern is kind of there that we're going to see pop-up storms. So tonight's forecast, I'll give you the city-by-city forecast here. We're going to see these isolated storms tonight. Very warm. The dew point's in the 70s, so don't expect temperatures to move much tonight. And then tomorrow for the weekend, mid to upper 80s. Now, the temperature is really kind of uncertain as well, because if the sun comes out in this kind of setup, we could easily jump to 90. There's absolutely no question about that. Even an hour or two of sunshine, you jump to 90. But with that sunshine, that would actually lead to some pretty big thunderstorms as well. So the sun is kind of a catch-22. Yeah, people want to see it on the weekend, but I think tomorrow would be a day you probably don't want to see the sun, because it would be really just crazy hot and humid, and also would mean we'd see some big-time storms. So that's a look at the hour-by-hour forecast. So if you got plans with Dad on Sunday, it's Father's Day weekend. I know a lot of folks will be planning stuff with Dad, maybe heading to the lake, maybe playing golf, maybe going to the pool. Just know the later you get in the day, the higher the chance of rain. I know it says 20%, but it's pretty much because there could be a storm at any point, and the uncertainty and the timing is crucial. And then we'll take a quick glance at the 7-day forecast, and the 7-day kind of tells you, hey, we're not going to see much of a pattern change, honestly. The rain chances stay pretty solid, and if we go 10 days into the future, you could see next week it gets even hotter. So we're locked in. I know it's summer. It's supposed to be hot, but as you can see, the averages are 66 and 87. So starting really Sunday into next week, we're going to see a lot of temperatures above those numbers, which are normal for this time of year. And it's really the overnight lows. I think you're going to feel this because seeing low to mid 70s possibly in some areas only for low temperatures, that will tell you how muggy it's going to be, but also the fact that if you're starting the day in the low to mid 70s, it's not going to take much to get to 90 degrees, especially since, the 21st is the longest daylight of the entire year. So you're getting 14 and a half hours of daylight. So you're looking at maximum sun here the next, at least incoming solar radiation at the least. It may not be all sun because we've got some clouds, but this is the time of year you're going to get the maximum heating. So that's a quick look at the forecast. Let's talk a little bit about last night. We had some incredibly heavy rain, especially in the southern part of Charlotte. There were some areas that saw ridiculous amounts of rainfall. I mean, we saw a few swaths across southern Mecklenburg County, from Steel Creek community through the Archdale area, Madison Park area. If you don't know, you're not familiar with that area, that's basically where Woodlawn and Park Road come together. Park Road Shopping Center, Montford Drive, very popular area of town, heading to Myers Park, and then eventually over towards South Park Mall, and then all the way to East Charlotte, almost to the plaza. We saw some real heavy rain. So let's take a look at those totals. So this is a look at the rainfall totals in that area. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to make these gigantic so you can see them a little better. This is the 36-hour rainfall, and I'm going to zoom in on a couple of these areas because it really highlights some of the totals we saw. So these areas, this 5.33 inches, that fell at Tyvola and South Boulevard. That's where we saw just incredible amount of rain. And most of that, 4.6 inches of that, 4.6 inches, fell in 90 minutes, okay? And I'm actually going to do this in real time, so we'll kind of show that gauge real quick. I'm going to pull it up here. I think I can do this. We're going to try to show this in real time. This graph here, we'll see if I can bring it up. So I was looking at this today, and it was really interesting to see. So this is the location, the map's right there. You can see right off of Tyvola. See if I can reload this from what I did earlier, because this was pretty incredible to see. So what I'm going to do is we're going to break this down by day. I remember how I did this earlier. By minute, we can do this. So let's see if I can get this to load. Best part about doing this is the minute by minute data, if I can get this to work. All right, let's see if I can highlight. There we go. We'll highlight it a little bit closer. So I'm going to zoom in on this area right here. We're going to try to do the 5-minute data because it was pretty impressive to see within basically from about 7:45 last night to about, it was roughly 9 o'clock, we saw that 4.6 inches of rain. And so some of these creeks came up pretty high in that area. And so let's look at those creeks. The one that in particular that we were looking at that was near Madison Park area, I believe it was this one right here. No, it wasn't Little Sugar Creek. It was, which one was that, Jeb? That was the Hope Creek. Oh, that was the one. Yeah. So this is the one, and we'll show it kind of full screen here. It was crazy to see how big this area got. So I keep forgetting how big to make these now. Let's see. There we go. So we're going to zoom in on this area. So that was the creek. Look at that. That spike right in the middle of your screen actually goes off. I need to make this a little bit bigger. I'll zoom it in even closer. But basically, yesterday, before the rain, it was less than a foot deep, okay? And it jumped all the way up. I think the max was just around 11.45 feet, so almost 12 feet. in the span of about an hour and a half. Now, the record crest at this location was 9.9. So we broke a record, just absolutely obliterated. There's the max value, 11.48. And that's just incredible. To see that go up, you could see the min was a half foot. And so this was pretty close to that heavy rainfall, that 5-6 inches of rain. And so I know I have some video. Actually, I actually shot some video of this. I'm going to see if I can bring this up real quick, Jeb, as I'm talking to you. Show the, there we go. Let me see if I can bring it up. I think I downloaded it this morning. So I want to show a piece of video. So this was last night. That was like after we left. It was like 12:30. So this is right off Park Road and Selwyn Road area. That's the Little Sugar Creek. There's a greenway down there, looking off. So you can see how fast. You're probably saying, "Nah, that looks like water." Well, to put that in perspective, I think you got to look at the other video I have. I think this is today. This is what it normally looks like. So just to give you an idea, that's today. It's still high, but you can actually see the creek down there, which kind of shows you just how high that got. And I think I can show you today's before and after. This was one today. So look at that. This is the other side of the creek. Whoops, let me make this a little bit bigger. I shrunk it down for you. So that's a look at the creek today off to the right there. The left, that railing, which you see right there. Last night when I was there looking at this, you could actually hear the sound because the water was going through the railing and it was making this weird vibration noise because it was and then this morning when I went back, the greenway there is in the foreground. That's actually where you walk down there. It looks like the railing actually got taken out. And there's a few spots like that where you see there's bridges and places where the greenway actually crosses over the creek and it got completely inundated. So if you walk or hike on these creeks, today there's a lot of mud, a lot of debris down there. But I actually think this is like a success story. And I want to talk a little bit about that because, in Mecklenburg County, we saw this area get 4 to 5 inches of rain, and this blew my mind today. Ballantyne last night, this was at midnight, by the way, so just to put this in perspective, Madison Park area saw about 4.6, I think was the official number, but down in Ballantyne, which isn't that far away, that's a 10 or 15 minute drive by car, 0.05 inches of rain, okay? That shows you the isolated nature of this stuff, that you could get such a huge discrepancy between one spot and another. And so that's when we refer to localized flooding. Now, sometimes this localized flooding actually has a big impact downstream because that creek goes all the way down to Pineville, and we saw flooding all the way down to Carolina Place Mall as that kind of moved down in that area. So, that amount of water can happen in a short period of time. So last night I posted this, and so I'll pose this question to Jeb since he's in here. What do you think 1,000-year rainfall event means? And be honest.
All right.
Yes.
As the least meteorologically inclined person in the room now, I would assume that it happens once every 1,000 years.
Yeah, you would think that, right? That makes sense. Like, why in the heck? So that's not exactly what that term means, which is, it's probably the most confusing thing we use. And we have two terms to make it even more confusing, Jeb. We have 1,000-year rainfall events and we have 1,000-year flood events, which are completely different things. So let me show you this real quick. So you're probably wondering too, I had someone ask me last night, like, we don't have records for 1,000 years. How do we know? Well, here's how we know. So we have this great data set, and just to kind of peel this back, we can zoom in on the area. Actually, you can see the map I plotted there. We put the pinpoint there, and we can look. We have this beautiful chart. In this chart, I know there's a lot of numbers here, so I'll show you a graph that's a little easier to read. It's probably going to be better for the eyes. We get these curves, okay? And so what these curves are showing you is a precipitation in inches, like for a certain spot, over a certain time period, and then the curve tells you how frequently that is supposed to happen at that location. So last night, let's just say 90 minutes, we'll say 2 hours for the sake of argument here, we had about 5 inches of rain, right? If you look at this, this chart here, 2 hours at 5 inches gets to the very tip top of this chart. And if you look off to the right, that gray line, which is where we are roughly, says 1,000 years, okay? We can actually look at the table. I can go back to the table if you want to look at the table, and we can scroll over from two hours, and if we go 2 hours in this area and we saw 4.6 or 4.7, that's roughly right there. It's a 500-year rainfall event, but it kind of fluctuates between the two. So why isn't that a once in a 500-year event? Okay, it's a probability. Okay, so a 100-year rainfall event would mean any year there's a 1% chance. So it's 1 over 100. So think about, and I promise I won't always do math on this show, but 1 over 100 is 1%. 1% chance. 1,000 year is 0.1. So it's a probability, meaning that could happen every single year. It's just there's a very low probability. And that's for rainfall. So rainfall is just the amount of rain that falls. You guys saw the map on that spot on the map, the lat and long. So how do we come up with that? Well, the way that we come up with that, we do have rainfall data, but we have paleoclimate data, we have sediment data, tree rings, ice cores, all those things. And we can run a model that says, this is the atmospheric conditions that should be in place for this much water to fall in this spot. And with 90% confidence, by the way, you see that at the top, this is a precipitation frequency estimate with a 90% confidence, meaning there's only a 10% chance of an error in this. So it's a pretty good model. That's the amount of rain that falls in that area. Now, why are these maps important? Because for insurance purposes and for infrastructure, these are the kind of modeling and the information that the city would use to build storm drains, let's say. And what they normally do, they probably would never build for a 500 or 1,000 year rainfall event. But if they know that the probability is 1% or 10%, they might build something for that. So these are great maps to look at if you buy property, if you have a home and you're thinking, do I need to prepare for a certain event? You can give a probability of that happening at your house, and you can decide whether you need to invest in flood insurance. So I would say everybody should invest in flood insurance, because last night's a prime example. There was 300 structures that got hit, I think, with flooding last night. And so the video was pretty crazy. I know some of our reporters were out there, and Jeb, I know you got some of the video put together. We had flooding at the Colony Apartments. So that's the video you're looking at right now. That's in the parking garage. I actually got video from South Park Mall in the parking garage of flooding. So thanks to Brad. And we had Walker Lawson out there today at those mobile homes right there. Boy, right on cue. Look at that. They had water into their mobile home. So that's right off the Little Sugar Creek. But look at today. I mean, it's like less than 12 hours later, that water is gone. So that's just a little example of how much water can fall in a short period of time. So in a city like Charlotte, we live in a very flash flood prone city. I don't think it's, a big mystery that we get a lot of rainfall here. But I get this question probably all the time, should I buy flood insurance? And most people think you need to live in a floodplain to buy flood insurance. First of all, no, you don't. In fact, if you don't live in a floodplain, it's a lot cheaper to buy flood insurance. And second of all, your homeowners will not cover you for flooding in many locations. It's better for water to come through your roof and flood your house than water to come up from the ground. Because if the water comes up from below, your homeowners won't cover it. So if you talk to Stormwater Services or you talk to anybody in FEMA, they will tell you the advice for buying flood insurance is, if you live somewhere it rains, you should buy flood insurance. That's the best advice I can give you, because water is the worst possible thing you could have happen. So last night was a pretty unique situation to see that much water in a short period of time. I don't think I've seen maybe one or two events like that in our area. Most of the bigger events that we get that would create that much water are usually tropical systems. Occasionally you'll get a stalled thunderstorm like this, but last night was a prime example. And just look at this map. I mean, this will kind of show you the areas for tonight that we're worried about. Everywhere that the green numbers are, numbers that are like an inch or less. But you can see now that 9.11 is completely wrong. Some of these does include backyard rain gauges. But the area we saw flooding today is out here towards the sandhills. So you can see some of these areas saw 3-4 inches of rain. And so now we're worried about tonight. Any storms we see develop tonight, if they move over those areas that got the heavy rain last night, it could actually take less rain to cause additional flooding, because now those creeks and streams are running way above bankful. And just to give you an idea, we can look at some of the creeks right now. I showed you this creek earlier. Just look off to the right there. Even though it's come down, look how much higher the water is there compared to last night before it started raining. So last night, what did I say? It was like a half foot, or like right now, it's already at 2.68 feet. So it's already got a couple feet higher than it was last night. So which means we wouldn't need 4 inches of rain tonight to cause the same flooding. It would only take, like 3 inches, 2 inches. So tonight would be an example of where if we see rain over these areas that were hit hard already, we're actually at 2.08. That's the last reading there. So almost a foot and a half higher than it was yesterday pre-flood event. So that's why tonight, if we see an additional rainfall, we could see areas. So these are actually the gauges right now for the rivers and creeks. And you could see most of them are anywhere between 1, 3, 4 feet. So they're, yesterday before it started raining, most of these were less than a foot. And if you've been on the Greenway, it's like the creek is super low. You can see the bottom, it's up to your ankle. And that's the way these creeks are going to be. So I said earlier why I think last night was a success. Think about this. We had maybe a 1,000-year rainfall event, and we didn't have major flooding. We had some, and trust me, if you're in one of those homes that got water, it was a major flood. But for a city like Charlotte to see that much rainfall, we didn't have as much damage as you would expect. You know why? Because the greenways did their job. Those are supposed to flood. The city has done a great job. Stormwater services. These greenways are great recreational locations for all of us. I enjoy them. My kids enjoy them. You probably have run on them. But our network of greenways are actually where the water's supposed to go and flood instead your house. So we want the water to go down there and flood. So those greenways are built there for a reason. There's no infrastructure there. If you've been on the greenway, the bridges that cross over the water, you'll notice there's little ridges and there's actually holes so the water can flow over the bridge when it's submerged. So a lot of the greenway is built to flood. Now, it's not fun to go on it the next day because you're running in mud and everything else, but the rain coming today will wash some of that away. But the greenways did their job last night. So through the weekend, we want you to stay safe. We're going to have coverage coming up at 7 o'clock right here on WCNC+. Make sure you stay weather aware as we're going to see more flooding. But coming up in 2 minutes, more news.